When The Way We Were exploded onto movie screens in 1973, it wasn't just a romance. It was a cultural earthquake. Robert Redford, Hollywood's golden boy, and Barbra Streisand, the fearless songbird turned actress, lit up the screen with a chemistry so raw, so magnetic, that millions swore it had to be real. For decades, whispers followed them. Were those stolen glances just acting, or something far more dangerous? Behind closed doors, Hollywood insiders spoke of tension, desire, and a connection that blurred the line between performance and passion. Then came the news no one was ready for. Robert Redford, gone at 89. In that moment, the speculation ignited all over again. Fans looked to Streisand, desperate for answers, desperate for one final truth about the story they had imagined for half a century. At first, she stayed silent, but when she finally spoke, her words shattered that silence in a way no one could have predicted. And what she revealed may have changed the way we see Hollywood's greatest love story forever. News of Robert Redford's passing at 89 didn't just mark the end of a career. It felt like the closing of a chapter Hollywood had never truly finished writing. Fans weren't only mourning an actor, they were mourning an era, the rebel who became a legend, the face of American cinema, the man who seemed to embody both elegance and mystery. Tributes poured in from all corners of the world. Actors, directors, politicians, even activists spoke of his brilliance, his quiet power, his decades of influence. But as the flood of memories rolled in, one silence grew louder than all the others: Barbra Streisand's. For half a century, her name had been tied to his in whispers and speculation. Together, they had created one of Hollywood's most unforgettable love stories on screen. Off screen, the mystery lingered, a tension that never fully disappeared. Fans and journalists alike turned their eyes to her, waiting. And yet, she said nothing. Days passed. Headlines multiplied. Where is Streisand's tribute? What does she really feel? With every hour of silence, the fascination deepened. Some wondered if she was grieving privately. Others speculated she was holding back because the truth was too complicated, too heavy, too personal to ever share. And then, without warning, her silence broke. Her words, simple but piercing, revealed not just memories, but emotions that reignited everything people thought they knew about their story. Long before the rumors, before the speculation, before The Way We Were, Robert Redford was Charles Robert Redford Jr., a restless kid born in Santa Monica in 1936. He wasn't born into privilege or fame. His father worked as an accountant. His mother raised him with warmth and endless encouragement. It was she who nurtured his artistic streak, who believed in his imagination. But tragedy struck early. In 1955, when Redford was only 19, his mother Martha died suddenly at just 40 years old. The loss devastated him. He later admitted it haunted him his entire life, leaving him wary of love and permanence. That heartbreak, deep, raw, unspoken, gave his performances a subtle intensity that audiences would one day feel, even if they didn't know why. As a teenager, Redford wasn't a model student. At Van Nuys High School, he was the bad kid, more interested in art, sports, and mischief than academics. He had talent in tennis, practiced with champions, but was restless, never satisfied. After high school, he earned a scholarship to the University of Colorado, only to lose it within a year due to drinking and recklessness. What seemed like failure became reinvention. Redford fled to Europe, drifting across France, Spain, and Italy, painting, sketching, soaking in art and culture. He lived cheaply, drank too much, but slowly a vision formed. He didn't want a life of routine. He wanted to create. That hunger brought him back to New York. At Pratt Institute, he studied art. Then, at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, he found acting. By 1959, the restless boy had been reshaped into a young actor with a magnetic presence. The stage was calling. Redford's rise wasn't instant. He started on Broadway with small roles in Tall Story and The Highest Tree. In 1963, everything changed with Neil Simon's Barefoot in the Park. Playing opposite Elizabeth Ashley, Redford lit up the stage. Critics called him a revelation. Suddenly, he wasn't just another actor. He was a sensation. Television became his training ground. Between 1960 and 1965, Redford appeared in nearly every major show: Maverick, The Twilight Zone, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Untouchables, Perry Mason. Each role sharpened his skills. By 1962, he'd already earned an Emmy nomination for the voice of Charlie Pont. Hollywood took notice. His early films, like Inside Daisy Clover with Natalie Wood and This Property is Condemned, proved his screen presence was undeniable. Then came the defining moment. Butch Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969. Opposite Paul Newman, Redford's sardonic, charming Sundance Kid made him an international star. A BAFTA win, critical acclaim, and box office dominance sealed his place in the pantheon. By the early 1970s, Redford wasn't just famous, he was iconic. Films like Jeremiah Johnson, The Candidate, and The Sting turned him into Hollywood's #1 star. And yet, ironically, his most enduring role was the one he almost didn't take. When producers pitched The Way We Were, Redford flat out refused. The role of Hubble Gardner felt thin, shallow. He dismissed the character as little more than a prop for Streisand's fiery activist, Katie. Redford, wary of being reduced to the handsome golden boy, wanted no part of it. But Barbra Streisand saw something different. To her, Redford wasn't just the right choice. He was the only choice. She begged director Sidney Pollack to bring him on. Pollack, Redford's close friend, pressured the writers to rework Hubble. They gave the character more depth, more intelligence, more complexity. Still, Redford said no. Finally, with script changes, a sweeter contract, and relentless persuasion, Redford relented. He agreed. And that decision changed cinematic history. Because when the cameras rolled, what happened wasn't just acting. It was fire. Streisand and Redford clashed and collided, creating sparks audiences could feel in their bones. Their chemistry blurred the line between performance and reality, and the world has never stopped wondering, was it real? On screen, Redford and Streisand were magic. Off screen, things were complicated. Streisand admitted she was infatuated with him. Biographers claimed her feelings made Redford wary. He was private, protective, and didn't like anyone crossing his carefully drawn lines. During intimate scenes, Redford set boundaries. He reportedly wore double layers of protection and pushed for certain choices to keep things less provocative. In one moment, when asked to deliver a line that suggested Hubble wasn't good in bed, he flatly refused, saying his character, and by extension, Redford himself, would never be portrayed that way. Ironically, those barriers only heightened the tension. Streisand pushed, Redford resisted, and the clash created something electric. It was friction that audiences could sense, the kind that made their romance unforgettable. But Streisand wasn't the only woman to feel both captivated and frustrated by Redford. Jane Fonda, who starred with him in 5 films, confessed she was always a little in love with him. She once teased that he didn't like to kiss and often seemed moody, but admitted that working with him was always magic. Meryl Streep's memories were softer. In Out of Africa, she later recalled their river scene, Redford washing her hair as he recited poetry. To her, it felt sensual, intimate, unforgettable. She admitted she didn't want the day to end. Others echoed the sentiment. Demi Moore, who shared the screen with him in Indecent Proposal, called him unforgettable. Michelle Pfeiffer, after his death, wrote simply, "Until we meet again, my friend." Redford wasn't chasing tabloid scandals or short-lived flings. Instead, he carried an aura that left an imprint on those who worked with him, a magnetism that lingered. Away from Hollywood, Redford's story was marked by loyalty, heartbreak, and reinvention. He married historian Lola Van Wagenen in 1958, long before he became a household name. Together, they had 4 children, though tragedy struck early with the loss of their first son, Scott. The heartbreak was something Redford rarely spoke about, but it stayed with him. Through the height of his fame, Lola was his anchor. But the pressure of the spotlight eventually strained the marriage. After 27 years together, they divorced in 1985, quietly, respectfully. For years, Redford kept his relationships private until 1996, when he met Sibylle Sagers, a German multimedia artist. Unlike others, she wasn't drawn to his fame. They connected over art, activism, and the natural world. In 2009, they married in Hamburg. Together, they built projects around environmentalism and creativity, sharing a partnership that grounded him until the end. Even as his family endured more heartbreak, including the death of his son James in 2020, Redford remained deeply devoted. To him, his greatest role wasn't in front of a camera, but in the lives of those closest to him. And yet, despite all of that, one question remained in the public's imagination. What about Barbra? When Robert Redford died, the world waited for Streisand. Her silence stretched for days. Fans grew desperate for her words, believing she alone held the key to the truth. Finally, she spoke. In a message that spread like wildfire, Streisand remembered Redford with piercing honesty. She described how opposite they were. He, the outdoorsman who thrived under open skies, and she, the city girl who once joked she was allergic to horses. Their differences, she said, were exactly what made their connection so powerful. But the detail that stunned fans most was her memory of their last lunch together. There was no talk of Hollywood, no reliving old glories. Instead, they shared something private, promising to exchange their first drawings. A simple moment that revealed a bond deeper than most had ever imagined. He was one of a kind, Streisand wrote. And with that, she gave the world a glimpse into a connection that had always hovered between myth and reality. Robert Redford's legacy can't be reduced to a single film, a single role, or even a single story. He was the actor who defined a generation, the director who told stories with depth, the activist who fought for the environment, the founder of Sundance who reshaped independent film. He was a man of many lives, many roles. And yet, for millions, his name will always carry one association: Barbra Streisand. Their chemistry, their tension, their mystery. Was it friendship? Was it something more? Or was it something that defied categories altogether, existing in that private, unspoken space between two people who understood each other in ways the rest of the world never could? Streisand's tribute didn't answer the question. If anything, it deepened it. Her words offered closure and yet reopened old wounds. A reminder that not every love story is meant to be explained, and not every truth is meant to be shared. Perhaps that is why The Way We Were endures. It wasn't just a romance on film. It was a reflection of something bigger, the kind of connection that feels real because in some way it was. And maybe that's the secret. Some Hollywood love stories never end because they were never fully fiction in the first place. They live on in memory, in mystery, in the space between truth and myth. And that is exactly where Robert Redford and Barbra Streisand's story will remain forever.